of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of new paradigm schools, as well as the book The Language of School Design, and countless articles for prominent educational and architectural journals. But Prakash and the EDA and FNI team are not simply a group of architects. They have approached the fields of education and architecture with a new set of techniques that challenge both professions for better learning outcomes for our students. Prakash has been my colleague and mentor for 3 years, and I have always admired his ability to challenge assumptions and break paradigms, even now, 3 years after beginning that journey. Thank you for attending this evening. I hope you leave Prakash's talk inspired to apply the same mindset to your own practices. Ladies and gentlemen, Prakash Nair.
And it's a real pleasure for me to be here in India. Sometimes I wake up and I wonder which country I'm in. But India is definitely a pleasure for me to be back in. I spent the first half of my life in India. Second, I'm here to talk about the nexus between architecture and education. And what it is that we have, when Annalise was reading my resume, it's kind of strange. The reality is that what I do should not be special. It should be something that we should all be just doing. You see that there's nothing, there's no mistake here in what I'm saying. And I just think that the difference is that we've actually gone out and tried to do it. And believe me, it's a hard sell. Education establishments are very conservative. Parents feel that they don't want to experiment with their children. But the greatest experiment is doing nothing and assuming that doing the same thing that we've done for the last 100 years is the best way to educate our children. I was talking to Nisha earlier and was interested to see the newspapers were full. We were in Indore this morning and then was reading the Times of India later how much incredible attention is being paid to these IIT scores. And it's just sad that this is what education has become, where we celebrate the achievement on the red side by side and buried on the 5th page that just in Mumbai alone 5 students committed suicide immediately after knowing the test scores. So, and that's just the most kind of obvious example of the sort of stress children are under, who's 23 years old, who's only now finding her way, but she did extremely well in school and sort of glided through college, exceptionally well, but came out and literally had no life skills and had to pretty much learn everything from scratch, And it's kind of sad that you would have 16 years of education and basically come out with very little that you can actually use in the real world. So what we've tried to do is to use architecture as a sort of catalyst for changing education. We talk to, it's almost like a Trojan horse in some ways. We talk to clients saying, well, if you're going to spend all those millions of dollars on building a new school, don't you want, and that school is going to be around for 20, 30 years, isn't it a good thing to think about what the world will look like 15 years from now, 20 years from now? We have to be futurists as architects because we can't design for yesterday, because our schools are going to stick around. While operations and organizations change, buildings are not going to change that much. So we use that as a pretext really to get a real dialogue going about what the future of education should be. So we started, just in a school, we just started working on in Indore with the question that I want to pose to this audience, purpose of education. Why do we send students to school, whether they are in university or whether they are in school? What is the purpose? And I'm sure there'll be lots of people here with answers, so why don't you start?
I think the purpose of education is to bring about a complete 360-degree change and all-round development, whether it is physical, social, emotional. It's not only, like you said, the IQ, I think the EQ is equally important.
Good.
To learn about life and who we are in the world, what we can do.
Okay.
It is. He should learn good values in life. That should be, the education also should help him to, that the thing that he has learned in his school age should be helpful in his career as well. Like as you said, that he or she should not start from the scratch
right.
by 23 or 24. The whole idea of education is to get him or her know what things he or she has learned in school age should help him or her during his life as well.
Education in its current format, I think, is more about trying to see how we can get people to think in a common format. So in the way it's done today, it's standardizing a process and getting people to, whether it's life skills or numeracy, literacy, etc. What it should be could be defined in multiple ways, but the way it is today is quite different.
Why don't you say, because you talk to me, what do you think the purpose of education is?
I feel that, as a parent, I feel that the purpose of education is to create global citizens and to impart life skills, critical thinking skills, and cognitive development.
Okay, excellent. Welcome to the people who just joined
How do
us.
we say that when a child arrives in this world, the first thing what one sees is light. Light gives rise to awareness. Awareness gives rise to intelligence. From intelligence, he has to or she has to differentiate between right and wrong. That gives rise to wisdom. And from wisdom, once you are wise, you will progress. So that is the complete cycle which we must complete right from the moment the child arrives in this world till the time he is ready for facing the life and the world in the right manner. This is what I feel.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, great. I mean, a parent would, given a choice between a child who is very successful but incredibly unhappy and another that is less successful but incredibly happy, almost every parent would choose to have a child. Some parents may not, because they keep insisting they should be doctors or engineers, perhaps. Even if they are unhappy, you learn to be happy being a doctor, right? But by and large, I think if you really ask parents, they'll tell you that I'd rather have my child be happy and not necessarily fit the definition of success, because the real definition of success is being happy. I mean, that's why people pursue success, so that they'll be happy, right? But they don't realize that success is not the end, but it's a means to the end. And so what happens very often is people end up pursuing things that don't make them happy, and as a result, they don't do what they do very well. And in this new world, they're not going to be very competitive. If you're doing things without the passion that is inherent in doing something that makes you happy, it also means you're not going to be very good at it. It also means you're not going to be that competitive. It also means you won't be that successful. So almost by definition, you start with happiness. You start with saying, what is it that makes me want to get up in the morning and do something? And that is the path to actually being a successful person. But if you start with success, which is the outcome, you are less likely to get to the real goal, which is happiness. So I think that that's something that gets lost in school, to the point where actually we had at least one person in the indoor audience tell us that they want children to be uncomfortable in school because it's a way to train them to be uncomfortable in life, because obviously they are going to be uncomfortable in life, so why not start them early, right? So that is actually a mindset that many parents actually truly believe, that being happy in school may actually be a bad thing, because now how are you going to prepare for life, which is actually quite tough. So this
I
is...
think it's more of children feel happy in this competitive world. And
Yeah.
I think it's the Indian culture.
Right.
In India, it's true that there's so much of competition that right from the time that a child comes to school,
Right.
he's actually happy competing with others, whether it's
Yeah.
academics or sports or table tennis or
Right.
anything. It's always he wants to be a star.
Right, but see, not everybody can be the star.
Yeah,
That's the problem,
that's it.
right? If you have 100 students in class in a school and 50 of them are above average, by definition 50 are going to be below average. So we have actually thrown away half of our students if you use that measure of saying that success is measured by whether you're above average or below average. So that means half of our students are failures on day one. We've already accepted that. You wouldn't be able to run a factory if you started by day one saying, I'm going to throw away half of all my raw materials, right? But yet we're willing to do that with our children. So here's the interesting thing. What I heard today, the words that I heard from all of you, and to some and myself, are above the line, our ideas, our philosophies. What we call the technical stuff, which is the non-negotiable stuff, like what time it is, and the formal language that we use to describe, pedagogy, instruction, learning modalities, whatever it is. those are languages that we use to describe our world. But below the line is what we say speaks to the heart, and this is where the words meet action. The question very simply would be, if this is what we believe in, and I could bring a different cross-section of people into this room, and pretty much I would hear the same things. They all want the same thing. However, this isn't reflected in the real world. And this is the question, why is it that if this is what we believe, that's not what is out there, right? So that all children shall succeed, right? And every learning shall be personalized. But then you go to a school which looks like a factory. It's not personalized. How do you make sure that all children are successful in a model which basically, as I said, throws away half of our kids, and where they're sitting on a cheap plastic chair for 6 hours a day? So that doesn't somehow gel with this notion that we shall personalize education, that we want every child to be successful, we want everyone to realize their potential. Somehow those words ring hollow when you actually go into a school. And I'm not talking about necessarily the schools you run here, but overall education system across the world. So the above the line stuff would be things like theories, concepts, abstraction, answers, ideology, efficiency. These are all things that are somewhat measurable. Below the line, values, human beings, awareness, questions, conscience. So we talk about the German education system, for example, before the Holocaust, was considered to be one of the best in the world because it had all the things above the line, but it did not have a lot of things below the line. And unless you integrate the two, you don't have a true education system. So here it is. This was all children will succeed, learning will be personalized, and yet we're happy. This is actually from a very exclusive Australian school, that image of those plastic chairs, which just one version of the plastic chair that we, which we wouldn't sit on for 6 hours a day, but we're quite happy to see kids sitting on them. That's when that gentleman said, well, that's a good thing. Let's kids suffer because it'll make them tough for the future. So these are some images actually I took from when I was touring some schools in Delhi. These are very expensive schools. And these are the way the classrooms look. You can see some imagination in the way it's been designed, but this is basically what you end up getting. And this I wanted to contrast with what we call a learning studio. And you can see the difference between that. And it's not necessarily expense, it's more the notion of students having an opinion and being able to work independently and being able to work in teams and then being able to work one-on-one with the teacher. And you will notice the blackboard is lower where students can write on it. So the blackboard doesn't belong to the teacher, it belongs to everybody. Everybody gets a chance to present, everybody gets a chance to perform. So it's a more democratic place to be, and you're teaching life skills, how to behave in life. In fact, this classroom actually has 2 doors. One is a child-sized door, one is an adult's, because a child coming through a 6-foot door, it doesn't feel the same. We just take it for granted that this door feels normal. For the child that's only that tall, it doesn't feel that normal, right? So there's every attempt being made, and so it's not rocket science, but it's what you believe education is. I mean, this is the physical manifestation of our philosophy of what we think education is. And we keep duplicating this model over and over. And I'll show you other pictures to say it's not about money. Trust me, it's not about money. The same amount of money can be directed towards building schools that are far, far, far better from a humanistic perspective. So really, when you talk about the ages, you have the agricultural age, which gave it the industrial age, technology age. But education is really still stuck in the industrial age. That's unfortunately what's happened. So we're now actually gone past the technology age. Many people think we're in the technology age. That began in 1950 with the invention of the transistor. We're way past that now, and yet education seems still stuck in that mode. So in the conceptual age, as we call it, Dr. Ken Robinson has said that you can go to schools anywhere in the world, any part of the world, the developed countries and developing countries. You'll see mathematics and sciences are at the top of the heap, and then you have humanities and arts. And within the arts, again, there's a hierarchy where music is on the top of the list, and then visual art, and drama, and dance comes last. So what Ken Robinson is saying that this has to be turned on its head, that in the 21st century, the creative professions are going to dominate, and the ones that are what also called left brain dominated, many of those functions will actually be taken over by computers and technology. So this idea that That's what you need to be successful, is being already disproven in terms of, for example, college admissions, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So conceptual education, if you think about this, it's not the master of subject matter, because you can access subject matter from almost anywhere in the world now at any time. It's mastery of one's person. It's a myth that we can adequately restore in life that which you have dismantled in school. School tends to be about breaking everything up and teaching things in a piecemeal fashion. For example, you wouldn't want to teach someone to drive a car by teaching him how to use the brake on day 1, use the accelerator on day 2, use the gear shift on day 3, and so on and so forth, and say, oh, by the way, now I've taught you all the parts of the car, go and drive the car. It has to be a holistic experience. So when we break up school into math and English and science and social studies, you don't experience those in the real world. You need to find a way to integrate them, make learning interdisciplinary, integrate them into real world projects that kids find meaning in. And the curriculum can still be covered. It's not what you teach, but how you teach. So that's the problem. So what we expect is that somehow magically students are going to come out in life and put all of these things together that we have broken down for them in neat little segments. It's not going to happen, and it's not happening. There was actually a study that found that students coming out of 4 years colleges in the United States could not make change from $3 after a $1.65 sandwich and a 60-cent can of Coke. They couldn't say, well, how much change do I get back? They couldn't make that change in their head. This was after 16 years of education, right? So this is the reason we have to rethink the whole notion of education. So the reason, of course, is that this model, which is the industrial model, where information sort of trickles down to the lowest level, which is the students, obviously, and they are like vessels into which you pour all this information. That is totally changing to this model, which is what we call a network model of education, which is much more democratic, where students are accessing information and resources and other people when they need it, where they need it. So we are replacing a just-in-case model of education with a just-in-time model of education. So you're not learning something just in case you might need it somewhere in the future. You're not cramming your head full of 12 years worth of information, God forbid that you might need it someday. Instead of that, you're learning, the curriculums become much narrower and deeper instead of shallow and wide. So this Hole in the Wall project, Dr. Sugata Mitra, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this project, has shown that children basically are self-organizing and they can teach themselves. And this is a project where he put a computer in a hole in the wall in many poor parts of the country, in many places that don't speak any English at all. And everything that was on screen was in English. And despite that, students on their own figured out how to use the computer, figured out how to access the internet. And apparently he went back after 3 months to one of the villages and he talked to the students, and they were using the terminology of the internet. In one case, they actually figured out a way to get the English alphabet so they could figure out what they were reading. And when he asked them how they enjoyed this experience, they said, well, we like it, but we just want a faster processor and a better mouse or something like that. So that was their complaint. But anyway, so this is the proof that we are getting children coming to school who are actually leaders. I mean, think about a 5-year-old. They are very social, right? They're very gregarious. They are risk takers. They're willing to experiment. They're willing to make mistakes, right? They're willing to challenge authority. And what do? We, as Ken Robinson likes to say, we educate the creativity out of them. They're coming in as creative citizens and leaving as automatons almost. And then we celebrate how well they did on a standardized test that is administered to millions of others, right? That's what we are celebrating. So that gets me back to what I started with, this notion of talent. It's overrated because we measure talent, as I said, by those measures like test scores and things like that. Whereas what real talent is the combination of hard work and passion. So if you're passionate about something, you will tend to work hard at it. And only if you can put those two things together will you be talented. In fact, they did a survey of hundreds of really, really talented people, and they found quite surprisingly that these were not talented people in the way we think of them, that they were born talented. These were people who put their passion to work. They worked really hard at something that they were passionate about. So getting back to the world today, why do we have to do all this? Harvard's MBA program admits 10% of applicants, whereas UCLA's Master of Finance program admits only 3 persons. That means it's 3 times more difficult to get into the Master of Fine Arts program as it's to get into an MBA program. And the reasons are simple. You cannot clone an MFA in India or Malaysia or China, right? Whereas you can clone an MBA pretty much anywhere in the world. And very soon many of these other professions like accounting and to some extent even journalism are being outsourced. You cannot outsource a fine arts degree. It's impossible because every person who graduates from that course is unique. They bring something absolutely unclonable to the table. And this is actually spreading to other professions. The medical profession, which was an ultra-conservative profession, University of Pennsylvania, one of the top medical schools in the country, this was a couple of years ago, had already been recruiting students from the humanities because they felt that humanities students are much more creative, they are more abstract thinkers, they are also more holistic thinkers. And they said that's the kind of people we need for doctors. Now because the medical profession obviously is changing, it's becoming more with integrated medicine. You know, we are going away from the super specialty where the person knows only one tiny part of your body to someone who can step back and look at you as a human being, right? And so that's what they now want. They're realizing that those people make the best doctors. So getting to the thing about how learning happens, you know, given that world is changing so quickly, we have these 4 primordial learning metaphors. One is the campfire, which is kind of what I'm doing now. And it's what we call a storytelling mode, where one person speaks and everybody else is sort of learning from that one person. The second is the watering hole, which would happen like if I were to stop right now and just let you be on your own, you would talk to each other and you would be in your watering hole mode of learning, which is peer-to-peer learning. Third is cave, where you learn by yourself. You are internalizing and synthesizing everything that you've learned in the first 2 modes of learning. And the fourth is live, where you get to apply. So when I read these, Dr. David Dornberg's primordial metaphors, I thought, wow, this may apply to architecture. What if there are spaces that are what we call campfire spaces? What if there are watering hole spaces? What if there are cave spaces and live spaces? And when I used that analogy, I found that schools were in fact focused so exclusively on campfire mode of learning that these other forms of learning were really not being celebrated. Certainly the architecture wasn't celebrating it. And therefore the teachers were sort of forced into certain modes of learning and teaching as opposed to others. And this is happening in higher education as much as it is in schools. So the students of course go to what we call mixed modalities, where today's students might be listening to music, they might be working on homework, they might be chatting, doing a text message, you know, and not listening to a parent at the same time. And we're confused about what mode of learning are they in. And this is happening in schools as well. So for example, this is a campfire mode of learning, and this classroom has been clearly designed to encourage that mode of learning. This is a school that cost $145 million. It's a school that was built in Detroit about 3 years ago. And the pride and joy of the city, but this is what one of the classrooms look like. And you notice there are not even any windows there. This is some of the stuff. Jay Littman, our architect, who by the way, I don't know if I introduced him. Jay, why don't you stand up? Jay is our chief architect, and I just wanted to contrast what we're doing for the private sector with what the education community seems to be happy with now. The private sector would not spend $145 million to end up looking like this. They would spend a lot less money to end up looking like this. So what I'm saying is there seems to be a real double standard when it comes to schools. It's not the question of how much money you spend, but our expectations and standards are very, very, very low when it comes to schools. So these are just some of our images for non-school projects, right? Now we want to bring this kind of thinking to education, and hopefully all our projects look more like this than the others. Now this is a school image. And many of these images from schools, I'm not trying to stack the cards. I'm actually going to good schools that are presumably very successful, and in many cases exclusive private schools as well. You can see the kinds of spaces. But they could be like this. They could be like this. This is actually one of our schools, but you can see even though it's in a campfire mode, we try to do something with color. This is a movable partition, so the room can become bigger. The lighting is designed to be up and down lighting, so the ceiling doesn't look like a cave. There are many features. The wall at the back actually is angled so that the sound from the speaker doesn't reverberate as much. So there's some thought given to the design. Social space is the same thing. This is what you find all around the world. And this is a school we designed in New York City, and we just took those hallways out, got rid of the corridors, and we created spaces where students can collaborate. This is from a higher ed setting. This is what you might call a cave space. This is a picture that Jay Littman recently took in, where was this? MIT. And you can see this is the quality of the space in the education sector can be what you tend to see in the so-called private sector. This would be a live space where you are actually building and working with your hands. At MIT, there is a building that's actually designed along the concept called CDIO, conceive, design, implement, and operate. The whole building starts with the idea that you conceive an idea, you then design it, you make it, and then you see if it works. And that's going through those cycles that we talked about, where learning has some meaning and has some relevance. And this is what the building looks like. This is actually one of the, this school was ranked by US News and World Report as the #1 high school in America. And this is what it looks like. And when I then dug deeper, I realized that it was #1 high school because of test scores. But the superintendent was very upset about that designation, and she said, we are not the #1 school. I don't think this is what makes us a #1 school. And the kids were ultra focused on exams. And when I asked them what form of learning they liked the best, guess what they said? It was very unusual. They said they like the lecture form of learning the best because the teachers just tell them what to do. They learn it, like Raj was talking about rote learning, and then they go and perform exceptionally well on exams, and now everybody celebrates them. So it's working for them. So they are under this mistaken belief that this is what education should be all about. Whereas this is a school we developed for a very poor community in Minneapolis, and this is what their cafeteria looks like. And this costs substantially less than many of the other schools that I was showing you. This is a school we developed in an old industrial building, and this is what the social areas of the school look like. This is the cave space, where we're talking about a school, I think this is in Australia. And this is what a library might look like. This is the library designed for the Duke School in North Carolina. They had almost no money at all. This was parents scrounging for the last dollar. And you can see the mechanical systems are just exposed. The lighting is just hung. There's no ceiling as such. But we managed to bring a lot of daylight in. All the windows are operable. And it's a very pleasant place to be in. Again, with spending substantially less than the public schools, government schools in that same community. This is what technology looks like. This is, by the way, a picture from that Thomas Jefferson, #1 high school in the United States. And this is another image from a new school that was just a few years ago opened in North Carolina. This was Pathways World School 10 years ago in India. This was, when I was called in India, one of the first things I said was technology has to come to the students. Students shouldn't have to go to the technology. You know, they should have access to technology anytime, anywhere. You have a beautiful campus. I want them to be able to access technology when they're outside, sitting on grass and all that. And sure enough, that's exactly how they ended up doing it. So this was, I think, the first wireless campus in India. And this is today. This Scotch Open College, which just opened last year, the middle school. Well, this was in Tasmania. And now we realize that technology is not just about laptops. It's also about having access to, students sometimes might go to a computer and just use it for a couple of minutes and then leave. Just as we need access to information, they need access to information. What they have found from research is that computers that are just there, always on, connected to the internet, tend to get used the most, even more than laptops. Because with laptops, you have to actually turn it on. And that's a 5 or 10 minute thing, and kids don't want to do that. So unless they're working on a project that's going to take a certain amount of time, it's not worth turning on a laptop. So computers that are just up against the wall like that tend to get used a lot more than even laptops. But then laptops get used a lot more than computers that are just sitting in a computer lab, 3 times as much. So, and it's a lot cheaper than to have a laptop lab as opposed to have a computer lab that's sitting there, waiting to be scheduled. So here is an example of what I talked about, where these computers are there and kids just come, students just come and use them. And again, when you come to live spaces, they need to be more organized than this. There's no reason it should look like that or like this. As I said, something like this is actually far more effective from a teaching and learning standpoint. Or this, where older students can mentor younger students. Now, how do you do this in a classroom? How do you have a mixed age grouping in a classroom setting where every teacher is stuck with 25 students? It's impossible. So architecture is a huge limit to how we educate our kids. Whereas here you see a multi-age group doing a variety of things. So you don't know what form of learning they are in. Are they in cave, campfire, watering hole mode? You don't know. And you can see the X's represent what we shouldn't be doing. And these represent what we should be doing. This is from Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. This is from a school in Japan. This is a school in Singapore with a similar climate as Mumbai. Very, very tiny slide as well. This is actually my son's school, which this was his class, and you can see there's the window is up there where the kids can't look out, and at least in this case partly open. Most of the time they're completely closed, so there's no fresh air and they can't look out either. By the way, there's now research that shows that if you have daylight and access to views and access to nature, you can improve the brain can improve its brain function by for analytical type activities for between 10 and 25%. Just looking out at nature, just having a window could make a huge difference in your educational outcomes. So that same room, you can see how it's been changed. With that, and now also you notice that these two teachers are working together as a team. And a lot of the stuff that the educators want to do has been facilitated by sometimes very simple changes to the architecture. So gymnasiums, yeah, great, it's nice to have gymnasiums, but it would be nicer if we can bring daylight in to those spaces, like these. Or while there's such an intense focus on sports, we should be more focused on physical fitness. Physical fitness, because sports is not something that you keep, how many kids are going to play sports their whole life? Whereas physical fitness, including nutrition and health and stuff like that, can be more permanent. This is what the computer business lab looks like, and I don't know why. The teacher actually said the reason she did this is because she can see every computer screen. This way she knows that the kids aren't doing anything they're not supposed to do. Whereas this one, in the same school, they didn't trust the kids with computers, but they trusted them with these knives. So that was kind of interesting. But this is what it should be. This is what real learning is, where you're actually participating in an activity. And in fact, the food that these kids prepare is actually eaten every day. So there's an immediate response to how well you've done. That's your test right there, right? And in this case, they actually have an outdoor, the kids actually have a demonstration area, there's a restaurant, and there's an outdoor bistro, and so the kids are learning to be chefs and run a business at the same time. This is a marketing lab, but what we said is why not have a student store and let the students run the store and let them have a back office where there's marketing, there's sales, there's accounting, operations, customer relations, and learn about all these things while they're in school. Why not make that your marketing lab instead of this? This means nothing. This is just an academic exercise. This is again Scotch Open College in Tasmania, showing you how we want to use the outdoors. This is, and by the way, all of these spaces that you're seeing have been captured from what would traditionally be hallways and corridors. None of our schools have any corridors. This is actually a small case study to show that it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. This is a school in Rhode Island. Jay Littman was our chief architect on this. And this is the before view, traditional corridor, working directly with the teachers, ask them precisely what is it that they want, how do they want to teach, the questions that I started with. That corridor was removed and you ended up with this, that same space. So this is the exact same space as this. And didn't cost a lot of money, it was done over a few weeks in the summer. And now you have multi-age groupings, you have all the 4 teachers working as a team, which you couldn't do before. And finally, I think this is Chris Torres. This is again in a very poor part of Minneapolis. We have created 2 learning communities. And if you have any questions, I'll describe more what a learning community is. And basically the notion is that going away from this idea of 1 teacher for 25 students to 4 teachers to 100 students. So now you have a team working together as a community. And students now have 4 adult mentors as opposed to having 1 mentor. So if one child or a few children have problems, one teacher can go away with them and they still have 3 other adults to take care of them. So this community model tends to work a lot better than the traditional classroom model. And so this is what it looks like, this is what a learning community looks like. And you can see there's a teacher who's outside the classroom working with the students, and this could not have been done had this been in the classroom. And finally, this was an old gymnasium that we converted over a matter of a few, I think it was about 4 months, to this space. That's the exact same, this space looked like this in 4 months. And if you really look at it very closely, it's very inexpensive. There's almost no materials being used there. It's glass, it's lightweight construction. It's all in the way we did the interiors and brought the daylight in. And you notice that all the daylight has been closed off, and those views have now been brought back into the new space. And finally, the schools need to have a sense of identity, so students have a connection to that, regardless of which part of the world they are in. And you can see some of the buildings, we try to have a special sort of ambience to them. So finally, school should be less about preparation for life and more about life itself. And what we try to do is, through architecture, we try to get people to that place where this becomes, as I said, a catalyst to reform your thinking. So all the ideas that I heard at the beginning of the session, we try to make it real. Everything from training teachers to be prepared for that kind of new way of teaching where you are actually letting children make mistakes, letting them be in charge of their own learning, as opposed to feeling that you have to control every child every minute. Questions?
On high-rise school buildings,
You can actually do a high-rise school. It's a challenge, but there's absolutely no reason you can't do it. We just completed one in Indonesia, which is 3 stories, and that could have been 7 stories. And we have connections to the outdoors. We have, these communities that have been created within the school, and it's not an issue. It can be done, absolutely. It has to be done thoughtfully, and you need to make sure that students have enough opportunities for physical activities and exercise, but it's absolutely not a problem. All of the ideas that I talked to you about can be implemented in a high-rise building.
What is the maximum number of floors you can go for a school?
Honestly, there's no limit. The Millennium School that I showed you was actually done on the 17th and the 34th floor of a building in downtown Manhattan, about 2 blocks from the site of the World Trade Center, the ground zero. There is no real limit to that. It's, what we do is we create learning communities. So for example, we create a community for grades 2 to 4, say. So those kids basically don't travel that much. 80 to 90% of all the things that they need to do are within their communities. So they don't have to travel up and down the school. So the school is broken down into communities as you go up, right? So kids don't have to actually travel that much across the building. So that.
When you vertical school, what as good as a horizontal school?
Given a choice, I would pick a horizontal school. But what I'm saying is that, design is about using your brain to come up with solutions, and you have to work with the constraints that you have. You can't say, well, this is a constraint and I'm not going to work with it. So you have to figure out ways to do it. And I'm just saying that I know certainly we work in vertical schools and we feel they are very successful. We haven't seen that as a constraint at all.
Can you have a school which is 30-story?
Well, you wouldn't have a school as 30-story because, as I said, you can actually create a school of, say, 2,000 students if you wanted to, but you would create learning communities of no more than 100 to 125, maximum 150. And the reason for that is we have something called a social channel capacity. As human beings, we can only know another 125 people personally, right? If you're in New York City, if you're on the subway, you'll be holding this and you'll see somebody else, they're standing 6 inches from you, but you don't look into their face, you don't see them, but it's like, because you want to give them their privacy. Because you're seeing so many, and in Mumbai probably it's the same thing, you don't say hi to a stranger on the street, right? But if you go to a small town or a small village, everybody's going to say hi to everybody else because you're not overwhelmed. So it's the same thing with schools. So if you have 2,000 students in a school, it's like an institution. Students feel out of place and they feel anonymous. That's why they do graffiti, they do damage, they vandalize things. But what we do is we create these communities. So from the students' point of view, they are entering a learning community of no more than 100, 125. Everybody knows them by name. They know all their friends by name. The teachers know everybody by name. So the anonymity disappears. So it's the same thing like you belong to a university of 50,000. There are universities in the United States that have 50,000 students in them. You have a sense of belonging to the university, but you're not going to know all 50,000. So I might say I go to the University of Illinois, but I am part of the College of Architecture. And within the College of Architecture, I'm within the Department of Urban Design. Now I might know everybody by name in Urban Design Group. Architecture people, I might just say hi. The rest of the university, I'm just going to ignore them along the street. But we have a common thing. We might all wear the blazer that says University of Illinois. So it's the same thing. You have a 30-story school. It's no different than having a university for 50,000 students.
You promoted a lot of daylight bringing in the classroom or open light. What is your idea about bringing air conditions in the classroom and making the classroom more like a 5-star hotel, which IB schools are promoting?
I know AC is being considered like a big deal. We were actually in indoor, and it's a dry heat there. Though Jay would argue that it's still too much. It was like 45 degrees. It was, I think, the worst heat wave in 30 years or whatever, 50 years. But I didn't mind it. In fact, I found it more uncomfortable when I got out of the plane in Mumbai today, as it was in low 30s, I think. And so in places like that, particularly if you have a lot of breeze, there is really no reason to air condition at all. And air conditioning actually hurts your system in the sense that children who grow up in air conditioning have a much harder time they have allergies and various other problems when they actually go out. People like me who grew up with I had no air conditioning at all. Until I left India, there was no air conditioning. And I don't get sick, I don't have allergies, nothing. And whereas my son, who's only 8 years old, is already developing some allergies. And his teacher said, oh, we can't open the doors because all our kids have allergies. And I said, well, if you open the doors, maybe they won't have the allergies. That's just a thing here. For a child, the classroom is his world. Very young child, right? For an older child, the world is his classroom. And this is what we need to keep in mind, that as you grow older, your horizons expand and your classroom becomes very limiting. And you have to make many opportunities for students to do things outside. But when you're very young, you need to be under constant adult supervision. It's okay to make the classroom type space a simulation of what that child would experience in real world. So what we do is we create these learning centers. There's messy play, there's storytelling, there's discovery, there's science, there's reading, and those are all interchangeable displays. They're not permanent. So they're constantly changing and giving a child different experiences, so they're not getting bored with the same thing. So that's how we would set up a very early childhood type of place.
So when you say that you have these learning spaces and learning centers and you'll have these social networking and socializing, what happens to the noise pollution? Do you have soundproof arrangement done into the school? Because that's a major problem with large number of students in this country.
Right.
If you have in this room with different spaces, there's going to be so much chaos that we really wouldn't know what will happen.
Yeah, this is a good question about noise. I'll tell you that I've been there's a school called Minnesota New Country School. It has no classrooms at all. Every student has their own workstation, and there are about 100 of them. And the first thing that you notice is, why is it so quiet? That is the question that you ask. So it is not borne out by the reality. The thing is that the reason kids make noise, the reason why is because they are restless and they are bored. But there are certain activities that are done in quiet areas. Like, for example, if you want to do music, you don't do it outside where you're distracting everybody. There are things like small group studies, which are happening in a small group room, right? So there's certain things that happen in rooms, and certain activities like messy play, building things with clay and things like that. Have you been to a children's museum? Did you notice the energy that's there? They're not rooms, they're areas that they're there, but the kids are running around, they're active, that's kind of what we call a healthy noise, healthy buzz. But that doesn't mean you don't design acoustic baffling and other ways to make sure that it's not a surface where every surface is reflecting sound. So you have to be very careful about how you design those spaces. But there's a difference between healthy noise and unhealthy noise. And as I said, the Children's Museum is an excellent example where you see children are engaged, excited by being there, and they're learning, but they're not being put into little rooms. This question of security, one was from Tasmania. We designed a school in Tasmania, and the reason we were called in there is because somebody actually cut through a barbed wire fence. They used wire cutters, they went in there and they burned the school to the ground. So when we were called in, the first thing people were thinking was that, okay, these guys are going to design a fortress with huge walls and maybe gun turrets there to make sure that nobody can destroy the school. Guess what? When we designed the school, it had no fences, nothing. And because we designed it as a community school, the community takes ownership of the school, it's a pride and joy of the community, and the community polices the school. So what's happened is that there is, as far as I know, you've been there recently, there's been no vandalism, no damage, no nothing to the school, and it's been now several years since the school has been open. So security is something that comes from within, and also the kind of culture that you create, right? That's one thing. The other is security, believe it or not, a lot of the security problems come from the students themselves. When you treat them like prisoners, they will behave like prisoners. And I got a call from the Washington DC Police Department saying that the more secure they try to make their schools, the more security problems they were having. And they were curious to find out whether these small learning communities that I talked about would make a difference. And the reality is that we've now seen from research that when you create learning communities where everybody knows everybody by name, if a stranger walks into the school, they immediately know it's a stranger, right? So those ways of what they call, it's called crime prevention through environmental design, CEPTID is what it's called. We worked in some of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the world, and our schools are some of the safest in the world because of that, because you're using environmental design to make things safe. We call things like eyes on the street, where there are adults who can see everybody that's coming in, and all those kinds of things, which are unlike prison bars that just kind of make schools feel, like I said, students feel totally controlled and make it feel very institutional. I can understand that there might be need for security because of terrorism fears and all that through the gate, but once you get through, the school has to feel very welcome. You know, you just can't have a school that there's no excuse to make the school for the children to feel like they're in prison. There's no excuse to that.
Using all material locally or foreign?
Locally, absolutely, yeah.
You're using the material from the country.
One of the most important facets of sustainable design is to use locally available indigenous materials. I just wanted to say that FNI has been working now, we've actually done work in about 30 countries, as a matter of fact. And India has been a place that we really wanted to do more work in. I get a lot of calls from India, but because of the distance and the expense, it's not been very feasible for us to do the kind of project. So what we've done is we've partnered with an Indian firm, BSB, and together we've actually created a new entity. It's called EDA, that's who's sponsoring this event, so that we can actually bring a lot of these ideas, tailor it and customize it for Indian conditions. Obviously, if it worked in 30 countries, it's proof that we're not going to just import a Western model or whatever. Every country, within the country, every neighborhood, every community has its own ethos that needs to be reflected in what you do. And so we're very happy now that a lot of the stuff that you see is not going to be just theory anymore, it's going to be practice. We can actually begin to do this here.